I was looking at those industrial press brakes online last night. You seen the price tags on those things? You could buy a mid-sized sedan or a modest house in the Midwest for what they want just to put a 90-degree kink in a piece of plate steel.
Checking the catalogs again, Tiger? I thought we agreed your tool budget was currently occupied by that vintage anvil you had to have last month. The one that's currently serving as a very expensive doorstop?
Hey, that anvil has soul. But the point is, there's this weird gatekeeper mentality in metalworking. People think if you don't have a $10,000 hydraulic lung to squeeze the metal, you're just playing pretend. It's nonsense. Metal's just like wood, only it's got a worse temper, and it doesn't forgive you if you oversleep.
So, what's the poor man's alternative? Because the last time I tried to bend a bracket for my shelves using a hammer and a prayer, I ended up with something that looked like a crumpled soda can and a very bruised thumb.
Ah, the hammer and hope method. Classic. But really, if you understand how a material gives up its yield strength, you can make it do pretty much whatever you want with stuff you've already got lying in the scrap bin. I read this great piece by a guy named Captain Robert who builds these wild trikes. He doesn't have a fancy pipe bender. He just uses leverage and a piece of wood.
Hold on. You're telling me I can bend steel tubing with a 2x6? That sounds like a recipe for a splintery catastrophe.
It's all about the jig, Alex. He basically cuts a French curve into a thick piece of lumber. You know those curvy plastic drawing guides from high school geometry? Imagine that, but in a 2x6. You clamp one end of your tube to the wood, and this is the secret sauce, you need a long tail.
A long tail? Like extra material?
Exactly. If you're trying to bend a piece of square tubing and you cut it to the exact length first, you've already lost. You've got no handle. You need about 3 feet of lever hanging off the end. You start at one end of the curve, clamp it, pull a bit, move the clamp, and walk it around the wood. It's like slow dancing with a stubborn partner. You don't force it, you guide it.
Okay, so leverage is the friend of the person with a small bank account. I get that. But what about the thick stuff? You're talking thin wall tubing. What if I'm trying to bend a 1/4-inch steel plate for a bumper or a heavy-duty bracket? Even with a 6-foot lever, I'm just going to lift my workbench off the floor before that steel moves an inch.
That's when we start cheating with the laser, or a zip disk if you're patient.
Cheating? I'm listening.
There's this technique, well, the folks over at Sencut Sen talk about it a lot for their laser cut parts. It's called relief cutting. You basically turn the metal into a paper airplane.
You're going to have to explain that before I try to fold my lawnmower into an origami swan.
Think about it like this. Why is a heavy plate hard to bend? Because you're trying to compress and stretch a massive volume of molecules all at once. But what if those molecules weren't there? You cut a series of dashed lines, like a tear here strip on a cardboard box, right along your bend line.
Won't that make the bracket weak? I mean, you're literally removing the metal where you need it to be strong.
Not if you do it right. You leave little tabs of solid metal between the cuts. When you bend it, those tabs are the only things resisting you. Suddenly, that 1/4-inch plate feels like a piece of heavy cardstock. You can bend it by hand or with a simple wrench. Once it's at the angle you want, you just run a bead of weld across the cuts to heal the wound. It's essentially a perforated fold.
That's actually brilliant. It's like pre-scoring a piece of leather. But I'm skeptical. Give me the what went wrong story. I know you've got one. There's no way you figured this out without a learning experience.
Oh, you want to talk about the taco fender?
The taco fender? Please.
I was building a custom rack for an old motorcycle. I decided to use the relief cut method, but I got cocky. Instead of measuring the gaps, I just eyeballed it with a 4.5-inch angle grinder. I cut the slots too wide and left the tabs too thin. I went to bend it, and instead of a nice crisp 90-degree angle, the whole thing just collapsed. It folded like a wet taco shell. I didn't have enough metal left to weld back together. It was more bridge than bracket at that point.
So there's a math to it?
There is. The rule of thumb is that your cutouts should be about half the width of the material thickness. If you're working with 1/8-inch steel, your gaps shouldn't be much wider than a 1/16. And the tabs, the parts you don't cut, need to be beefy enough to hold the weight, but thin enough to yield. It's a delicate balance between sturdy and stubborn.
Speaking of stubborn, let's talk about cutting. We've been talking about bending, but you can't bend what you can't cut. If I don't have an angle grinder, maybe because I value my skin and the lack of sparks in my carpeted garage, what are my options?
People sleep on the hacksaw, Alex. Honestly, everyone wants the power version, but a high-tension hacksaw with a good bimetal blade is a surgeon's tool. I've seen guys like Kevin Karen do things with hand tools that would make a CNC machine blush.
A hacksaw? Tiger, I have a life. I can't spend 3 days sawing through a piece of channel iron.
That's because you're probably using the blade that came with the saw 10 years ago. It's got the cutting edge of a butter knife. You get a 24 TPI, teeth per inch, blade. You lubricate it with a bit of wax or oil, and you let the saw do the work. Don't white knuckle it. Metalworking is about rhythm. If you're sweating, you're doing it wrong.
Okay, fine. Hacksaws for the patient. What about for the rest of us?
Well, there's the score and snap method for thin stuff. You take a heavy-duty utility knife and a straight edge. You score a deep line. You really lean into it about 10 or 15 times. Then you clamp it to the edge of the bench and just give it a quick flick. It snaps clean as a graham cracker.
Wait, for real? You can snap metal like that?
Aluminum sheet. Absolutely. Thinner steel. Sometimes. It leaves an edge that's actually cleaner than what you'd get with a saw because you isn't removing material. You're just encouraging a stress fracture in a straight line.
I feel like I've been lied to by the big tool industry. You're telling me I don't need the $300 metal shears?
Look, those tools are great if you're doing it 40 hours a week. They pay for themselves in time. But for us, for the den dwellers, half the fun is outsmarting the material. Take Kevin Caron's approach to thick steel. He'll use a simple propane torch, not even an oxyacetylene setup, just a torch like you'd use to melt ice off your driveway.
A propane torch? That doesn't get nearly hot enough to melt steel.
It doesn't have to melt it, it just has to relax it. Steel is like a person who's had a really long day at work, tense, rigid, ready to snap. You apply a little heat, and the molecules start to let go of each other a bit. They become plastic. You don't need the sun's surface temperature, you just need enough to get it into that cherry red zone. Then, even a heavy bar will bend like a piece of licorice.
I can see the headline now. Local podcaster accidentally sets workshop on fire following advice of man known as Tiger.
Safety third, Alex. No, wait, safety first, always. But seriously, if you got a bowl of water nearby and you aren't wearing a polyester tracksuit, heat is a legitimate tool even in a budget shop.
Okay, let's recap for the folks at home who are looking at a pile of steel and a very empty wallet. If I want to make, say, a custom bracket for a bike rack, step 1?
Step 1, determine if you're cold bending or cutting and healing. If it's thin tubing, build that wooden jig. Use the French curve idea so you have different radiuses to play with. And remember, give yourself a lever. Don't cut to length until the bend is done.
Step 2?
If it's thick plate, use the relief cut method. Put some dashed lines along your bend, fold it like a greeting card, and if you've got a buddy with a welder, have them fill those gaps back in. If you don't have a welder, well, maybe don't use that for anything structural like a trailer hitch.
And step 3?
Respect the grit. Use a hacksaw for the precise cuts, score and snap for the thin stuff, and never, ever underestimate the power of a long piece of pipe slipped over a wrench. Archimedes said if you gave him a lever long enough, he could move the world. He didn't say he needed a hydraulic press to do it.
It's actually pretty. There's something, I don't know, more human about it than something that came out of a factory machine.
That's the soul of the craft, Alex. When you use a machine, the machine does the work. When you use your hands and a bit of wood, you and the metal have a conversation. Sometimes it's a heated argument, but that's how the best stories start.
Usually with you smelling like burnt hair and looking for a bandage.
Exactly. But at the end of the day, that bracket holds up the shelf just as well as the one that costs $50 at the store. And every time I look at it, I remember exactly how hard I had to pull to make it mind me.
I think the takeaway here is that the barrier to entry into metalworking is a lot lower than the experts want you to think. You just need a bit of leverage, some clever geometry, and the willingness to fail a few times before you get it right.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Now let's go see if that taco fender can be repurposed into a very strange-looking planter for the front porch.
I'll grab the drill.
That's the spirit.